Well, today is a very special time in chapel because we get to hear from some students who have been to some great places over the summer. We have 5 students today who are going to talk about their summer experiences, and hopefully when you have been somewhere and you can come back and you can talk about your experience with us. These trips that we go on that are called Global Perspectives trips are wonderful. And they're very beneficial, I think, to help us get out and to see the world. See different things and experience different things, and it's a great experience. I love going on Global Perspectives trips. Well, today we have 5 students, and I'm going to introduce those students up front. Then I'm going to sit down, and they'll come without further introduction. But I want you to listen to their stories. You might have traveled with them, or you might be planning to go to the trip that they're going on or have been on. You might be planning to go on that trip in a year to come. So listen to these experiences and join with these students. First coming is Erica Iannarone. She has a cheering section here today, and she is a junior elementary education major, and her trip was to Thailand. Coming next is Garrett McCulka. Garrett is a sophomore. He has his cheering section here today. English Lit and Writing is his major, and he went on the England trip. Next, Alexis Jones. Okay, everybody has a cheering section here today. She's a junior human development major, and she went on the trip to India with the Ladies of Lee. Next, Michaela Robinson. Indeed, everybody has a cheering section. Michaela's a senior. Her major is exercise science, and she went on the trip to the Philippines. And then finally, wrapping us up today, Josh Clark. Okay, indeed, cheering sections for all. Josh is a senior. He's a youth ministry major, and he went on a trip to Panama. Erica's going to come. Would you welcome her?
Well, if you know me at all, I would have never thought I'd be up here telling you about the amazing time I had in Thailand. Because in all honesty, I dreaded going. But thankfully I am, because I experienced a trip which ended up being such a monumental time in my life. It was honestly the best experience I could have ever asked for. For me, this journey began before the sun even came up at 5:15. I stepped onto the bus not containing a soul that I knew. And before we even pulled out of Schimmel's, I was in tears. Looking back now, I would do it all over again. From the first flight that was 16 hours long, landing in Korea and getting stared at because apparently a little blonde girl isn't a usual sight there, to getting on another plane for 5 more hours just to walk outside at midnight their time and it still be 109 degrees. Talk about a shock. Over the course of the 13 days we were in Thailand, I got to experience some of the most incredible things. The first day, I went ziplining through the longest, highest, and fastest course in the world. And yes, that's incredible itself. But while I was riding through the forest harnessed in, the only thing I could think about was the fact that we served the one who created it all. And there were no words to describe what I was seeing. Getting to appreciate his creation didn't stop there. I rode elephants, snuggled with tigers, and a giraffe licked my hand. And nothing beats that for me because I'm such an animal lover. I even climbed, and yes, climbed is the only way to describe it, 365 steep stairs to the top of the tallest Buddhist temple in Chiang Mai. Even though all of these things were what tourist attractions and the reason most people visit Thailand, they were not what made me fall in love with this country. As an education major, I am drawn to children, and visiting 2 different schools while we were there really pulled on my heartstrings. Even though trying to teach creative arts to students grades K through 12 who spoke literally 0 English was the hardest and most challenging thing I've ever had to do, it was incredible just to see how happy they were to have people pour into them, because they don't receive that daily. They all have so little, even 9th graders were excited about crayons. It just put everything back in perspective for me. Even more than the schools, it was the day we visited the orphanage that captivated me. Our trip guide, Pastor Somnick, was the director and father figure of the House of Faith Orphanage, and he radiated Jesus. This man was literally the hands and feet of Christ. He prays and speaks life, and I would not have had the trip I did without his guidance. He made somewhere that I never thought I would feel comfortable feel like home. While at the orphanage, I got to play soccer with a lot of the older kids, who, let me tell you, could play in the World Cup. But they played with no shoes on a red dirt gravel mixed field. And even through that, they didn't care. They loved so well and had constant smiles that brought tears of joy to my eyes. After soccer, we got to go in for lunch that the house mom and the girls living there had prepared for us. And the feeling I got inside while I sat and looked around at the children, loving each other and loving us as well, was indescribable. After lunch, we worshiped together in Thai and in English, and then prayed for one another in our own language while Pastor Somnick translated for us. We got to stand in front of them and give them words of encouragement and tell them how thankful we were for the time we were getting to spend with them, and they did the same as well. It was one of the most humbling moments I've ever encountered. As my van of 12 drove away, 24 eyes were filled with tears. They had changed our lives, and I only hoped we did the same. Through all of these long days, we had even longer nights, but they were well worth the loss of sleep. Every night, we strolled through the night bazaar and bought souvenirs and tried weird rolled ice cream. I even let fish nibble the dead skin off my feet, or at least I tried. I couldn't keep my feet in the water. And I only tried it because Katie Sutherland made me do it, after she had to pay 5 baht, which is their currency, for toilet paper. Along with having to buy toilet paper, we had to ride in the bed of trucks everywhere we went. We prayed for air conditioning, even though we knew it wasn't likely, especially the night that it rained so hard the entire city's power went out. Thailand in the Dark with 38 students from Lee is something that could have won $10,000 on America's Funniest Home Videos. We were hysterical. Our whole trip was hysterical. We even made a book for our trip leaders based off of Dr. Seuss's Oh, the Places You'll Go, and just renamed it to Oh, the Thai Places You'll Go. We just wanted to remember all of the moments we laughed about. This trip was nothing like I expected it to be, in the best way possible. I would go back tomorrow if you told me I could. Thailand changed my life, and I haven't been the same since, and it's simply because I've been filled with the love and the joy and have so much more appreciation for what I have daily. The Lord showed himself to me in ways that I never thought possible, and I grew in my relationship with Christ, and that's not what I went on this trip expecting at all. Thailand will always be one of the best experiences during my time at Lee. I couldn't have asked for more. Thank you.
So when I signed up for my cross-cultural trip, I was pretty nervous. I was kind of scared, and like a lot of the other students, I'm sure. But like them as well, I was also really excited. I had an itinerary, but I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to see or who I was going to meet. I actually didn't even know who I was going on the trip with, which was probably the scariest part. But those strangers quickly became close friends as we all at once stepped foot in the heart of London. It was a bonding experience. See, for me, this was an opportunity to experience the world on my own without my 19-year-old hand being held by my mom's. I know I'm a little old for that anyway, but I promise that if she were there, she would have tried. Especially if she would have known that I would be separated from the rest of my group in the London Underground in the middle of downtown during rush hour. So, as part of my tour group went to Westminster Abbey, another student and I were pushed off of the tube by angry men and women trying to get to work on time. So we looked at each other and silently agreed that we would arrive like champs in a timely manner. We arrived like champs, but not so timely. We missed the first part of the tour, but I think we got the important part right. I remember after that my professor telling me, "I hope you have the confidence to know that you have the ability to get around in the world." And it was true. I was pretty confident in my ability to get around after that. But something interesting happened to me when I stepped foot on foreign soil. The perception of the world that had been formed over the last 19 years of my life, was instantly doubled when I saw what seemed to me like the collision of two worlds, the ancient and the modern, what I read about in history books and what I was used to seeing every day. I saw a 1,000-year-old cathedral standing opposite the English equivalent of Dollar Tree. It's called Pound World. Yeah. That's just one example, but I saw that everywhere I went. However, as incredible as the city was, I don't feel like I really got to see England until I saw the countryside, a land flowing with milk and honey, which they put in their tea because they really drink a lot more tea than I expected. I thought it was an exaggerated stereotype, but it's not. Everywhere I went. The village of Grasmere is where we stayed the last few days of our trip in England. It's made up of massive, beautiful hills, which are arguably mountains when you try to hike them at 5 in the morning, though some might disagree, those who didn't go up the mountain at 5 in the morning. It was also covered by miles of handcrafted stone walls. picturesque cottages, and just herds and herds of sheep. It was the kind of place that literally wanted to make me leave technology behind and live out of a backpack. I wanted to soak up every minute of it. But I think the most surprising thing that happened to me over this trip was how I came back. Before I left for the UK, I couldn't wait for the stories I'd get to tell. I wanted to tell people about St. Paul's Cathedral, or Chepstow Castle, Westminster Abbey. I wanted to tell it in detail to my friends and family. But the truth is, I think I have less to say about those things now that I've been there than before I left. See, when you see things like that, sometimes you're just left speechless, which made my poetry class a little bit harder than I expected because I had to write poems about those places. But they rendered me speechless. So as much as I would like to tell you more about English cathedrals or Welsh castles or classic double-decker buses, I really can't. I don't have much more to say about it. It's just something you'll have to see for yourself. I will, however, leave you with one more notable thing from my trip. It was the first time, and most likely the last time, that I'll ever be told that I have a beautiful accent. All right. Thank you.
Hi, guys. So I'm definitely honored to be up here today. And in the last few days, I was reflecting over what Megan Allen said at small group kickoff last week and how I need to stop finding my value in others asking me to step up and serve because they think that I'm doing something right. And if you weren't there, she specifically said, we all want Mike Hayes or Jimmy Harper to call us up and ask us to do something. And then the next day, Mike Hayes' office called me and asked me to do this. So I like to think that the Lord has a really good sense of humor, and just wanted to make sure that I knew the opportunities that I'm being given are not because I did anything to deserve it, but because he chooses me and loves me regardless. So I'm blessed to be here today, just like I was blessed with the opportunity to travel with 25 other ladies of Lee and our director, Jonathan Rogers, to Goa, India in May of this year to work with the organization Rahab's Rope. I had the privilege of singing at churches, helping with a vacation Bible school type program, and going out into stitch centers that set up shop in the middle of slums to give women an option to make good money from products. This is the first time that I've ever been out of the country, really out of the eastern United States, and I experienced a culture that genuinely is so different from anything that I've ever known. Most of what you hear is true: the sounds, the tastes, the smells. The food is often spicy. Sometimes stepping outside literally smells in a way that I couldn't even attempt to describe to you if I had to. There are people everywhere, poverty everywhere, street vendors everywhere. This one time we were walking through the city around some shops, and these street vendors would just follow us for blocks. It didn't matter if you ignored them, didn't matter what you did. They would follow you, banging drums in your ears and telling you about how much you need this scarf. One time this woman ran after us for blocks on end and yelling at someone in our group about how she needed this scarf because it looked like her. It was a solid white scarf. I gained a lot of experiences from this trip. I had the opportunity to sing with amazing women across the world in some insanely cool cathedrals. I had the chance to sit through a mass service, explore a Hindu temple, and so much more. But if there's one thing that I gained from this trip that I hope sticks with you over anything else that I've said, it's what I didn't come back with. I went expecting to have some kind of aha moment to come back and tell everyone about. I was hoping for the Holy Spirit to literally come down and tell me, this is where you're called to, or this isn't what I have for you. I came back with plenty of the short-term mission trip pictures and great experience serving kids and community members that are in extreme poverty. But while I was in India, I really struggled with feeling useless. I saw the value in spending time with these kids and loving on them, even just for that short period of time. But it was hard to feel like I was really making a difference when these kids that I was making a craft with at VBS were going home to a slum that was in worse shape than anything that I could try to describe to you. I didn't even feel comfortable taking pictures of it because it felt as if I would have been making someone's livelihood a museum exhibit. It was a tough feeling knowing that in the grand scheme of the kingdom, I didn't feel like I was doing much, but God was showing me something through this. I had to reevaluate my intention and ask myself, if what I wanted was to be able to come back and post pictures like you saw on social media, to feel better about myself. I kept wanting to feel like I was making a difference, when what was actually happening was God making a difference in me. I had to realize that it's not about me. I am not the Savior, but He is. He provided me with the opportunity to use my gifts and abilities to help this organization that's already planted there and established with these people for a short period of time, just like He provided me with the opportunity to stand here and tell you about it. I didn't come back with the aha burning bush moment of feeling confident and knowing what the Lord has for me or where He wants me to serve or what I'm going to do with my life. But what I did come back with was a realization and firsthand understanding that people need Jesus everywhere. And it wasn't about me going and seeing a crazy number of salvations and seeing lives miraculously altered because of anything that I was doing. But the Lord showed me His faithfulness in the small things just by sitting with me and loving on these people. So from those I got to serve in India, to unreached people groups around the world, to the community that I see across the train tracks here in Cleveland each week at Crossover, people need Jesus everywhere. I think for so long I looked at this experience like, man, Lord, I can't wait to go serve there in India, and I can't wait until I graduate and you let me know where I need to be to serve, without realizing that I'm surrounded by people at all times who need Jesus. The world is a missions field, whether that's back in India or down my hall. So you might never know how big of a difference you can really make being a light to those around you, wherever you are. So don't take that for granted. Thank you.
This summer, I was privileged to go on a Lee cross-cultural trip to the Philippines. While preparing this speech, I thought about sharing funny stories, like when I discovered firsthand what a bidet was, my first experience with a full body massage, or the time when a fellow student and I got lost while going for a run at night inside a huge gated community, and we started singing "Shout to the Lord" out of fear for our lives. But I really wanted to highlight the people and my interactions with them. Besides a few cultural days when we traveled to various cities to do touristy things, such as hiking an active volcano, we did several things in the community we stayed in, including teaching CPR, facilitating a basketball and volleyball sports camp, and helping out with a sports fest that involved events similar to those in the Olympics. Even though we had to come up with unique ways to communicate with the Filipinos, since some of them didn't speak English, no language barriers could prevent us from participating in activities we both loved. During the 2 weeks we were in the Philippines, our group stayed at an orphanage called Samaritan's Place. Their orphanage was organized in a way that several orphans lived in family units with a married couple, and infants lived with several single women. This setup represents the Philippine culture. They are such a relational culture with a Christ-like form of hospitality. They take time out of their busy day to get to know you and see how you're doing. Not only were sports a commonality between cultures, but we also serve the same God. I went into the trip with the perspective that we were going into another country not as superiors to them, but as equals. We were not foreigners, but sisters and brothers in Christ, both bearing the image of the Creator. I was overwhelmed by the humility of the staff service to both us and each other. They taught me what it really means to be a true servant of Christ, one who does not expect anything in return, but does it out of pure love for God and fellow man. I thought I could contribute something to them, but they demonstrated something even greater, something of lifelong value. Staying at the orphanage and spending so much quality time with the kids also struck me in a personal way, because I was adopted when I was a baby, and after my parents finalize another adoption this year, my family will have a total of 5 children, 3 of us being adopted. I was thankful for the opportunity to minister to the children there and share lots of memories with them. The joy that the kids and staff radiated was contagious. One day, I was playing in the alleyway with the kids, and I noticed that one little girl was holding what appeared to be a small pile of rocks in her hand. I soon discovered that they were moving and that they were not rocks, but huge beetles. After freaking out inside for a second, I forced myself to let one of the beetles crawl on my arm. I learned that the children play with these beetles much like kids in America play with action figures. They would pretend that the beetles were fighting each other, or they would throw them up in the air to watch them fly away. I was amazed to see the sheer excitement they had while playing with something that a lot of people are afraid of. I frequently played a game where I would escape from prison and several kids would come chasing after me. I had to take a few breathers in between rounds because the kids wanted to chase me over and over again. I would take every opportunity to play pickup basketball with the kids in the alleyway, and we would often play even after sunset. Since there was almost 100% humidity in the Philippines, I accepted the fact that I was going to be dripping with sweat the entire time. Time seemed to stand still in the early hours of the day when I would take walks around the community with the babies in strollers and feed them their morning breakfast, which comprised of noodles, rice, vegetables, and chicken. It was small moments like these that truly made me feel connected. The night before we left to return home, the kids performed a dance for us, and I want to share a few lyrics from the song they danced to. I often listen to this song when I long to return to the Philippines. The song is called Joy of the Lord by Rin Collective. When I cannot see you with my eyes, let faith arise to you. When I cannot feel your hand in mine, let faith arise to you. God of mercy and love, I will praise you, Lord. How you shine with glory, Lord of light, I feel alive with you. In your presence now I come alive, I am alive with you. There is strength when I say, I will praise you, Lord. I was so encouraged and inspired to hear a few of the caretakers' testimonies and how they trusted and obeyed God even through really tough situations. Their faith was evident, and I will forever be impacted by their stories. Thank you.
Hey guys, how you guys doing this morning? It's a little higher. All right. My Global Perspectives trip was a little bit different than everybody else's. That's because I didn't really go on a Lee-sponsored trip. So I set up an individually arranged one. And since I ever came to Lee and knew about the Global Perspectives program, I immediately knew that I wanted to get people together, set up a trip, and we all go. So I had already been to Panama before, so I decided that, hey, let's set up a trip to go to Panama, and I'm going to take people with me. I mention this because this is very possible for you to do the exact same thing if you've got such a passion for a country to go. But the main thing for us is that we wanted to focus on serving the people, but also making sure that we were learning from them and integrating with the culture. We worked with SCORE International, which is a ministry known to go on a lot of mission trips. I know some of the sports teams go on trips with SCORE. And we worked specifically with missionaries named David and Marianella. These people are full-time missionaries in Panama who have dedicated their lives to the people all around Panama City. We would go to different villages all around Panama City, and the thing about these villages are they are stricken and ridden with poverty. The reason for this is in Panama, there is a massive, massive wealth gap. So you are either incredibly rich or you are incredibly poor, and there's a very small middle class, which is not very common in comparison to most countries. But all of these villages reciprocated like that fact. So they were incredibly poor, and Panama City looked great, you know. So at the villages, every day that we went to, we would do crafts, testimonies. We even did a skit where we found like a Spanish version of You Won't Let, in some way, shape, or form, just to convey God's truth to them and share that light. And then we also helped build a community center in a village called Margarita. But the majority of our time was spent interacting with the people, and we even got to teach them English, which is really cool. Considering I set up the trip, I was considered the leader. So I honestly had to make some really tough decisions sometimes. We had some guys that got very, very sick during the trip, either through a stomach bug or just kind of adjusting to the food. Specifically, we had two guys, Logan and Carson, who got incredibly sick. They decided to dub themselves Splash Bros. You can figure out that meaning later. But they were so sick, honestly, we were fearful that we were going to have to send them to the hospital because they couldn't keep anything down. And, you know, as that person in that position of leadership, I had to make decisions like, guys, you need to stay here today. Like, you are weak, and we want you to be able to effectively do what you can do for the rest of this trip. And in that same way, I had to tell everybody else who's healthy, we can't stay here. We need to go and do what we came here to do. But the most beautiful part about being the leader of this trip was getting to see people grow, getting to see people get a little uncomfortable. Sorry for being cliche. get a little uncomfortable and actually push themselves to integrate with the people with a language barrier and stuff like that. It's weird that I was the leader because the entire trip I was on crutches. So I was coming off an injury that I did to myself in June because I'm an idiot. But I had to make the most of the trip. I really wanted to play soccer with the kids because I love soccer, and I wanted to, do a lot of things that I really could not. I mean, I even had to be carried a lot of times because the terrain was so rough. But there was one day in particular that it really hit me, and honestly, I got down on myself because we were doing a lot of work on the community center in Margarita, and I obviously cannot do much in my state of crutches. I was told I could paint things. I couldn't really do that effectively either. So I was sitting there moping, pouting like a loser, just hanging out with the kids, but honestly wanting to be a part of what everybody else was doing because that was the purpose of our day, was to help them build a community center. One of my friends, Matthew Thurman, who was on the trip with us, he came up to me and he's like, "How you doing, man?" And I was honest with him. I was like, "Dude, this sucks. Like, I want to be doing what you guys are doing." And he said words that I just needed to be reminded of. He's like, "Man, if you wouldn't have set up this trip, we wouldn't even be here doing this." I needed that reminder because and it just kind of clicked where I was just, this is just kind of a moment where I'm focusing so much on what I cannot do. And instead of focusing on what I can do really, really well right now, and that's encourage the people that I'm around and interact with the people I'm around. Just a reminder, I think, for all of us. Just in all of what we did in our time in Panama, I want to emphasize that they were completely based off of the relationships David and Marianela had already built with the people. We weren't coming as missionaries with just like a lost cause. We were just going, it's like, man, I really hope we meet some people. Like, there were all relationships built. We came specifically to support, empower, and bolster the ministry that was already going on. So for instance, the very first day we went to see the Embera people. It's an indigenous tribe off the Chagres River. Literally the only way you can get there is riding in a canoe, which for us was a 40-minute canoe, butt-numbing canoe ride. But the only reason we were able to go there is because of the money that we put forth, obviously, to go on the trip. And because of us putting this money forth, David is able to see the people. He is not able to go and see the people without groups coming. So we were able to help out in that way, in that ministry. The reason I say this, and I think it's so important, is that I think when we go on trips where we're just like, man, we're really going to share God's truth, a mission trip, whatever, we get caught up in some way, shape, or form in like some type of results. In some way, shape, or form, we think some sort of like number of salvations need to come out of this trip where we're going to go share God's truth. Guys, a successful mission trip is marked by our lives, and a successful Christian life is marked by obedience. It's not marked by results where we get to see salvations. So the biggest thing for us is that we were just like, we're just going and we're doing what God called us to do. We need to be okay with the fact, and sorry if I'm preaching a little bit, we need to be okay with the fact that we may not see the results of the seeds that we plant through what God is doing through us. Holy Spirit is going to do what He's going to do no matter what. And it's not based, we don't need to be so wrapped up in like, man, I just really hope I see a salvation. Guys, we didn't see a single one. That's okay. At the very end of the trip, we prayed specifically, the seeds that we have planted because we were obedient, Lord, do work in that. And that's what we need to be okay with. No matter what, we need to be obedient, and wherever we go, if it's right here or if it's in Panama or Europe, wherever we go, we need to be obedient to what God is calling us to do. So I really hope that challenges you in some way, and I really hope that if you have a heart for a certain country that there's not a trip to or something like that, that you would take your leadership and just take people with you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. Great stories today. Let me challenge you to start thinking about where you're going. This year in Missions Week, toward the end of October, we're actually going to have a small World's Fair, a small introduction to some of the trips that are available. There are lots that are available now. You can find some on the screens when you come in that are always announcing trips that are available. So there are lots of things available. Find a place that you want to go, get involved, and I know you'll have a good time, and you'll come back with stories like we've heard today. Well, let me tell you what's coming up in chapel. Tuesday, Nicole Lim is going to be here. And then on Thursday, Dr. Kahn will be here in the Kahn Center. And the Dixon Center will be Alternative Chapel. Little thing coming up called a youth church on September 11th. Anybody heard of a guy named Jimmy Needham? You don't want to miss that. That'll be great. Also, a couple of things coming up today. Men's soccer. Tonight at 7. This is their home opener. University of Illinois Springfield. And then on Saturday at 7. Men's soccer versus Lynn University. And they're the number 25 team in the nation right now. Stand with me, please. I'll wait. Thank you. All right. Thanks for being in chapel. We love seeing you, and we love spending time in worship with you, and I think this is a very important part of the community that we have here. Would you join me in our college benediction as we end today's service? Now let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Thanks and God bless.